Just a couple of weeks ago, I drove down to the dollar store that's only a few blocks away. I live in a neighborhood behind it, and occasionally I go there to get things. The store has cheap items, and sometimes it's a really good deal. I think I went there to get just a couple of things. I'm not sure what time the store closes, but it's usually open pretty late, even though not that many people go there. I got to the store and parked in the quiet parking lot. The store shares a parking lot with several other businesses attached to it. They are a pet supply store, a nail salon, and a pastry shop. Obviously, all of the other stores were closed. The parking lot was basically empty. There were just 3 other cars there in total. I parked and then walked inside the store. When I got inside, things were very quiet. I didn't really see anybody else inside for that matter. I made my way up and down the first few aisles looking for what I was planning to get. I spent about 5 minutes in the first 3 aisles of the store. It was at some point when I was in the 3rd aisle that I got the feeling I was being watched. I looked around to both ends of the aisle, and at first I saw nothing, but then realized that there was a man watching me. He stood halfway behind the aisle at the very end. He was looking at me with a straight face, but he was staring. This was really weird. I stared at him for a moment, giving him a somewhat dirty look. I was not amused by this. Then I turned and moved to the next aisle over. As I was in there, the man simply moved along to the next aisle. He kept a straight face and continued to once again stare at me as I shopped. This is something that I had never experienced before, and if this was this man's idea of a joke, it was not funny. I decided that I would not shop around anymore and would just get the things that I needed and leave. I left the aisle and walked several aisles down to get my final item. Once I was there, the man followed me again and repeated the same thing of staring at me. I decided to just ignore him. I spent a couple of more minutes inside, once going back to another aisle to get something that I had forgotten. Then I went to walk to the front of the store and check out. I had to walk past the man that was watching me, but he actually walked away before I reached him. I paid for my items, got my receipt, and then left the store. As I walked to my car, I thought about how strange that situation was inside. I was glad that it was now over. I reached my vehicle, put my items in the back seat, and then got inside. After I had started my engine, I looked in my rearview mirror to back up. I saw the man staring at me behind my car in the parking lot. He was facing me and just standing there. It was the same stare that he had given to me inside the store. The man was right in my way of backing up, and I wouldn't be able to leave until he moved. I wasn't quite sure what to do. I sat there, just staring at him in my mirror as he stared back at me. Looking back, I wish I would have got my phone out and taken a video, but that thought just didn't occur to me. I think I was just so shocked by it. Probably 2 or more minutes went by. The man was still standing there, blocking my way. I decided to honk my horn, but that didn't seem to do anything. I honked at the man again. Now he finally moved. The guy slowly took a step closer to the rear of my car. Once he had reached my car, he suddenly bolted around to the side. He was headed straight for my driver's door. I put my car into reverse and hit the gas. As the man reached my window, I quickly backed out of there and left. I did not wait around or stop to see what the man had wanted. I drove home, and I haven't seen the guy or been back to that dollar store since. I used to work at a Dollar Tree. Dollar Tree is a popular dollar store, and I worked there for about 6 months several years ago. I worked as a cashier, and after being there for only a few months, I would occasionally work by myself. We were always trying to hire more people, but luckily, every time I would be the only one working, it was never that bad. I worked mostly night shifts, usually until close. We closed at 10 p.m., and the store was in a sort of quiet area. One quiet night, I was working by myself. It was slightly rainy outside, and it would sprinkle on and off. I was noticing this because in the front of the store, ahead of the check lanes, there were windows looking out into the parking lot. After 8 p.m. that night, we hardly got any customers. The rain must have kept people in. I kept myself busy by doing small tasks, organizing things, and going on my phone. The last hour would always drag out, but it was also nice to know that I would be going home soon. And on this night, after 9 p.m., we didn't have a single customer. This was fine with me. I always felt a little bit nervous being the lone employee on the clock when somebody came in late at night. But at about 9:15 or so, I saw a car pull into the wet parking lot. Up to that point, my car had been the only one there. This car that pulled in was older and it was dark blue. It was a 4-door sedan, and it parked in the closest parking space, and then I saw a man get out. He was a little bit of a bigger guy, and he wore a blue raincoat and a gray and red baseball cap. He left his car and approached the store. After going inside, he walked down one of the aisles. I stayed by the register at my check lane and went on my phone. A few minutes later, I observed the man walking through the aisles towards the front of the store. He seemed to be just kind of casually looking around. He didn't have any items in hand, and he soon walked back out of my sight. Then he slowly walked towards the front. I looked over and made eye contact with the man for a brief moment. To be friendly, I smiled a little and said hi. The man just looked away and then slowly walked for the exit. Then he left the store. I watched the man get back inside of his car and then drive away. I was back to being by myself again. By now, it was about 9:30. I walked around the store and made sure that everything was in order. Then I decided to clean the floors now so I could leave right at 10. Luckily for me, nobody came to shop as I did so. This took me until about 9:50. Then I went back to my check lane and went on my phone for the remaining 10 minutes. I was checking the time on my phone every minute so that I could close right at 10 and then clock out. At 9:58 p.m., I saw a car pulling into the parking lot. I had a bad feeling. But then I noticed something. It was the same car that had just been here. There was no mistaking it because this was an older looking car and kind of unusual. The man who had just been here about 30 minutes ago was back, but he did not park close to the store this time. Now he went and parked right next to my vehicle. I had parked somewhat far away and up against a curb. The man parked on the side of the car closer to me, so my car was mostly obstructed from my vision by his car. I thought this was a little bit strange. I figured maybe the man had dropped something on the ground when he was in the store and he came back to get it. I'm not sure why, but that's the possible explanation that went through my head. The man did not get out of his car though. I had expected him to. Instead, he stayed inside of his car with the engine running. At 10 p.m., his engine turned off. It was now time for me to lock the doors, and I walked over to them, all the while keeping my eyes on the car in the parking lot. I wondered if he would get out when I approached the doors or something like that. I was a little worried for some reason, but he didn't. I made it to the front doors and successfully locked them. Then I walked to the back area to clock out of my shift. After doing so, I returned to the front, hoping and sort of expecting to see that the man was now gone. After all, he could clearly see that we were now closed, and I had just locked up. But the car was still there. It appeared as though the man was still inside of it. Now I had a really bad feeling. Why did he choose to park right next to me? There were a dozen closer spaces, and why was he even here at all? I thought about just walking out, going to my car, and leaving, but my instincts just told me not to. What if the man was waiting for me? I decided to wait inside and hope that the man would leave. I sat inside at my check lane, going on my phone and looking up every minute or so to see if the guy was gone yet. But he wasn't leaving, and soon 30 minutes had passed. It was now 10:30 at night, and the man was still parked right next to my car in his. I decided that I would text my best friend Brenna, who happened to live pretty close by. After telling her of the situation, she offered to come and pick me up in her car, and I agreed. I told her to drive right up to the front doors. My car and the man were much further away in the backside of the parking lot. She told me that she was leaving, and about 5 minutes later, I saw her car enter the parking lot. I walked over to the front of the store and then walked out. Right as she pulled up, she stopped briefly, let me in the passenger seat, then she quickly drove away. We left, and thankfully the man did not follow us in his car. We drove back to Brenna's house, and then returned to the Dollar Tree a short time later. The man's car was now gone. Brenna dropped me off, and I was able to get inside my vehicle okay, and then drive home. After that experience, I really wondered what the man was doing. Was he waiting for me to get to my car, and did he have something planned? I'm glad I didn't have to find out. This happened a couple of months ago when I was shopping at my local dollar store. I go there quite often and get all kinds of things, whatever I need really. I don't mind that the quality is cheap because I save lots of money shopping there. I wouldn't get just anything there though, but the things that I do work out just fine for me. The apartment that I live in happens to be a walking distance away from the dollar store. This also makes it very convenient for me. One late Saturday afternoon, I went to the dollar store to get just a few things. I walked the 10 minutes or so it took me to get from my apartment to the store. It's a smaller store and it's never usually that busy. I walked in on this afternoon to see just a couple of other people scattered throughout. I grabbed a basket and began shopping. I didn't make it very far though before something odd happened. When I made it to the back corner of the store, I saw a man standing there openly drinking a beer. The guy was dressed a little odd too. He didn't look homeless, but he was wearing a green sweater and sort of dress pants. He did not look clean or sharp, but also not that messy. I found this really odd and actually pretty funny. The guy was just standing there sipping out of a beer bottle. He wasn't shopping, but just standing there. I could see another bottle of beer that was open, hanging out of his pocket. I sort of laughed and smiled as I saw this. The guy wasn't looking at me though. Someone else walked past him, giving the man an odd look. I was shopping for some items nearby, but I got a little bit nosy and looked over every so often to see if the guy was still there. The dollar store did not sell beer, so I guess the guy must have brought it in with him. Soon after, I heard a store employee go over to him. I heard them telling the man he had to leave, and he was not supposed to be drinking in there. The man was not happy. There was a brief argument before he stormed off. He really didn't seem that drunk, but I guess he could have been. It was kind of unreasonable to walk into a store drinking a beer like that. Maybe he was pulling a prank or something. I finished up my shopping and went to check out. I got maybe 5 things, and the cashier put them all in a bag. After paying, I left and started to walk home. I made it about halfway back and was on the sidewalk when I saw the man up ahead, the guy who had been drinking in the store. He looked really angry now, and he was standing by a mailbox and drinking one of his beers. I noticed him staring at me as I walked closer. When I got about 10 feet away, the man's eyes had not left me. I smiled friendly to him and asked him how he was doing. The man kept his angry look and then cursed at me. I was really surprised. I decided to just walk past him and not say anything more. But as I was walking away, the man said, "Where do you think you're going?" I told the man that I was walking home, but as I did, I heard his footsteps approaching mine. I turned around and faced him. He looked even more angry. I told the man that I didn't want any trouble and I was just trying to get home. The guy started cursing at me again. I figured now that he must have been drunk. His speech wasn't slurred, but there was no other explanation for this erratic behavior. I turned to keep walking home, but the man then grabbed my shoulder and tugged me back. That's when I jerked away and started sprinting. The man began to chase after me, but he was not very fast. I ran all the way back home to my apartment and I got inside. Luckily, the man stopped chasing me just before my building. I had never felt unsafe before in my neighborhood, but after that, I have to be a little bit more careful. I'm not sure what that man's problem was, but I hope not to see him again.